now entering the truth zone, deep into the vortex of the information revolution with your host, Michael B.
I am your host, Michael B., and this is The Truth Zone, coming to you on the approaching summer solstice of 2017. Now, I'm starting off the show with an apology to all of you for yesterday's show. I was flat. I wasn't jacked up. So my apologies. It wasn't my best effort. And I like to be 100% on every single show, but yesterday it just didn't happen. Funny thing though, yesterday was the most amount of hits the show got since the days of May 8th and May 9th when I called into Alex Jones' show on Infowars.com, and he let me promote the show, and he put my show on his screen, and it had exploded. And then, of course, you know, as reality sets in, it comes back down to earth, but the statistics are showing that the show is growing steadily. And I thank all of you that have been with me, that are listening to the show. I thank you for downloading the show, sharing it, and I hope you continue to share it with your friends and family. And if you are a friend of mine on Facebook, feel free, put it in all of your groups. You know, the only things I have copyrighted are my theme song that I had created, that's mine, and I have the domain name, thetruthzone.com. That's it. Other than that, you know, please, take the show, cut up clips of the show if you want, take excerpts, you know, quotes from me, my audio clips including the show, whatever, go, do it. You know, spread it everywhere that you feel fit. That's great. I also thank my Facebook friend John Pittman, who basically, unbeknownst to him, has created today's show. And he did that by giving me a ton of videos on YouTube. And I spent all morning going over them, putting them in order, designing the show, which I will include my show notes when I repost the show at its conclusion. I'm going to do that. And so John Pittman, you, sir, have created, I think, is going to be a great show. Today is not going to be about politics, although certainly the political structure that we're seeing is on the earthly, it's an earthly manifestation of what's going on at the higher supernatural level, which I'm going to be talking about today. And what's not part of my notes, but it just hit me, and I've used this verse before. I don't remember if I've used it here in this venue, but I've used it. And I have two verses that stand out. The first one I'm going to give you is the most troubling verse I find in the entire Bible. And that's 1 John 5:19. the world lies in the power of the wicked one. Now, some translations have it, the world lies in the power of evil, the world lies in the power of the wicked, but I don't like those particular two translations because there's a vagueness. Okay, it lies in the power of evil. Okay, so bad people are running it. Well, who? Who are the bad people? Are they demons? Are they humans? Is it my parents? I mean, who? And the same thing with the wicked. Okay, same thing. Well, who's wicked? And sometimes we can have differing opinions on who's wicked and who's evil. But when you have the translation, the world lies in the power of the wicked one, well, there can only be one. There can only be one that is running the entire show of evil. And the world lies in the power of it. In conjunction with that verse, we have in the Gospels that when Jesus was fasting for 40 days, he was tempted by somebody. He was tempted to give up his mission. He was tempted to forsake his Father. And he was tempted with doing obeisance and glorifying another supernatural entity, another God, if you will, lower G. And if Jesus did obeisance to this entity, Christ would instantly inherit all of the kingdoms of the earth, which was given to him, given to the supernatural entity. And we know, if we've read the Bible, that Christ was tempted in the desert by Satan the serpent himself. So, you take that instance in the Gospels and you tie it into 1 John 5:19, it gives you a very clear illustration of who is in charge of earthly events. See, he doesn't have our soul unless we surrender that to him. And the easiest way to do that is to deny the cross. See, once you've denied the cross, once you've denied that Jesus is your Savior, is the Messiah, is the only begotten Son of God, is the firstborn of creation, which rest of the creation has been through him. Once you renounce that, or choose to never believe that, well, you've handed yourself over. See, earthly events that go on in my life, I do have some say in it. Absolutely. I am responsible for most of the events, good or bad, that happen in my life. Absolutely. And there's a series of events that definitely lead to certain outcomes. Absolutely. However, like it says in Ecclesiastes, we are also, and this is a rough paraphrase, we are beholden to unforeseen occurrences. That also is true. If I'm driving along and I'm aware, I'm awake, I'm focused, I know my surroundings, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, an 18-wheeler comes, T-bones me, and I'm paralyzed forever, I'm not going to accept the fact that I made that happen. Sorry. I'm not going to. I'm not going to do that. That's an unforeseen occurrence that most likely the person that did that to me, he had the issue. Exhaustion, mechanical malfunction, whatever. Whereas other things that happened to me, professional choices, personal choices, that could lead to like a bad outcome, not all of my doing, but I certainly, through decisions, put myself in those situations. I agree. So, absolutely, the person that has been put in charge of earthly events, he has a name, and it's Satan, and he's got a lot of control of those things because we've given it. We've basically given it. When we deny the cross and we don't live through Bible principle, and I'm talking about the Christian scriptures, absolutely, we've given him power. But he doesn't have to have charge of our soul. Okay? We don't have to lose our spiritual identity if we don't want to. He can't take that from us. We can give it. He can't take it. He could take our earthly stuff. He could take our children. He could take our property. He could make our bodies sick. He can do those things. But he can't make us renounce the cross and curse God. That's voluntary. And we know this to be true through the book of Job. Job, whether he literally existed or not, is immaterial. It's a fantastic allegory. Job was like the most prosperous man from the Orient, and that is not from China. The Orient was considered anything east of Israel, or at that time of Canaan. So you've got Babylonia, you've got Mesopotamia, you've got the Chaldeans. Modern day, it's Iraq and Iran, basically. That was considered the East, the Orient. And Job was like the most prosperous guy. And we know through the book of Job that Satan, even after he forfeited his station as Lucifer the light bearer, an angel of light, when he forfeited that through the Garden of Eden story in Genesis, which I'll get to a little bit later on, he was still welcomed in God's court. And when God, I guess, Jehovah, had a calling of the court, if you will, his heavenly angels, and we have 3 specifically named in the scriptures: Michael, Gabriel, and Lucifer. Those are the only 3. Unless someone has a verse that I don't know about, and maybe, I cannot remember all of them, but those are the 3 that are in the scriptures from Genesis to Revelation. Michael, Gabriel, Lucifer, who then became Satan, the serpent, the father of the lie. You see, in the Bible, folks, names change even for the same person because the names have meaning. And that's true today. You run into people with the last name Carpenter, for instance. Do you think the family chose the name because they liked the word carpenter? No. Their ancestors were given that name because somebody was most likely a prominent carpenter in that village. Let's go to Chris the carpenter. Or let's go to Jack the carpenter. Or John the goldsmith, John the silversmith, John the blacksmith. The surname was a name of significance symbolizing what you did or what you were. Some names mean beautiful, some names mean good, some names mean bad, some names mean ugly. Something in you were a prominent piece of that village, and then you were identified by that surname. It's the same thing in the Bible, which is why God has different names. Elohim, El Shaddai, and I'm going to get into that. And the last name that he was called or given to Moses was Jehovah or Yahweh. Either way you want to slice the translation, but it's I am who I shall prove to be. And it's the same thing with Jesus, and I'll get into that because I haven't found one person yet that agrees with me, and that's okay. And I'm not pushing anyone to believe my opinion. I'm just giving it. And I'll get into that in a little bit. So we're going to start with the first clip. And we're going to talk about the organization known as CERN. CERN is the European Organization for Nuclear Research. Physicists and engineers are probing the fundamental structure of the universe. They use the world's largest and most complex scientific instruments to study the basic constituents of matter, the fundamental particles. Now, on Google, and there is speculation on what Google's role and all of this earthly techno stuff. There's a whole lot of talk about Google. So it's no surprise, and this is coming from CERN's own website, right? There's no surprise that sounds pretty innocent, doesn't it? I mean, they're just doing nuclear research, physicists and engineers. They're probing the structure of the universe to see why and how and in which ways the universe ticks, right? I mean, no big deal. Very innocent. Well, of course they would be. However, there are people that like to peel the onion back. And as you know, when you peel an onion back, the smell gets stronger and stronger, and usually you develop tears in your eyes. Well, maybe after these they're audio for you here, listening to these audio clips, perhaps you too will have tears in your eyes. So let's go to the first CERN audio clip. And this show is about the supernatural layer and the possible manipulation or manipulations of different portals into different dimensions. And that's up to you to research if you want to believe these clips or to dismiss them as conspiracy theories. That is your will. But my faith, my Christian faith tells me, indeed, all of this is real. So here we go with the first CERN clip.
CERN is manifesting hell on earth with their darkest finding yet. As we've covered previously, CERN is doing very, very strange, magical science. Up until recently, scientists were in the dark regarding the composition of antimatter, but now researchers at CERN have shined a light on it. This article is by Emily, and of course, she is for the Christian Truther. And of course, the Daily Mail just happened to pick this one up. And we'll go over that in just a minute, because they've misinterpreted some of the things that are on this report. Today's alpha result is the first observation of a spectral line in an antihydrogen atom, allowing the light spectrum of matter and antimatter to be compared for the first time. Within experimental limits, The result shows no difference compared to the equivalent spectral line in hydrogen. This is consistent with the standard model of particle physics, the theory that best describes particles and the forces at work between them, which predicts that hydrogen and antihydrogen should have identical spectroscopic characteristics. Alpha is a unique experiment at CERN's anti-proton decelerator facility, able to produce antihydrogen atoms and hold them in a specially designed magnetic trap, manipulating anti-atoms a few at a time. Trapping antihydrogen atoms allows them to be studied using lasers or other radiation sources. Moving and trapping antiprotons or positrons is easy because they are charged particles, said Hangst. But when you combine the two, you get neutral antihydrogen, which is far more difficult to trap. So we have designed a very special magnetic trap that relies on the fact that hydrogen is a little bit magnetic. We have exposed, Emily and myself have exposed how, according to Manly P. Hall, Master Mason and Luciferian Initiate, the use of magnetism in magic traces back to magnetic conjuring in Egypt. The description of the Alpha experiment states that the antihydrogen atoms are able to be magnetically trapped. Antimatter is the opposite of matter. It isn't physical, it's spiritual. And it's all around us. It's also quite elusive and chaotic, as the machines are able to trap and contain chaotic antimatter. They are able to study it, bringing them one step closer to manifesting it physically. What scientists are most excited about regarding this finding is that it reinforces their view of supersymmetry. When stated, very simply, supersymmetry is the same belief many occultists have, as above, so below. For those of you who do not know what that means, we'll go over that in just a second. But for those of you who do, you ought to have caught on by now what is going on. They believe there is a balance in nature, and that every particle has an opposite, hence hydrogen and antihydrogen. As above, so below has been misinterpreted by the mystics that put faith in it. They see themselves as God on earth and think that their actions are replicated by a God in heaven. We must remember who their God is to fully understand the statement. They follow the Antichrist by worshiping Satan or Lucifer. In a Christian context, below would be hell, the realm of the damned, and the earth would be the above. They are manifesting the bottomless pit on our planet, not replicating heaven. It should be correctly stated, hell on earth. Now, to gather what that entire statement really means, I don't know if you understand what that means or not, so I'm going to try and explain it to you. They're trying to bring hell here. Heaven is not on this planet. No. Sorry. However, the Daily Mail has interpreted it as such. Now a Christian Truther publication has called CERN the Antichrist for performing these experiments. Conspiracy theorists claim CERN has unleashed hell on Earth in its latest antimatter experiment. Earlier this week, scientists at CERN announced they had used a laser to tickle atoms of antimatter and make them shine. This discovery marked a key step toward answering one of the great riddles of the universe. Now, a group of religious conspiracy theorists is claiming the research organization has manifested hell on earth. That's correct. Not exactly to the extent that it's already happened. It's happening. It's still going on. It's not like it's done. It's over. I mean, Jesus has not returned. The Bible is not complete. We are still in it. So when they say manifested, they're trying to say it's null and void. We've progressed past your little nonsense. Christians go sit in the corner. And we're saying no. We're going to speak a little bit louder, a little bit more blunt. Let's continue. Theory predicts the Big Bang produced equal amounts of matter and antimatter. Since they cancel each other out, scientists have been trying to find out why a relatively small amount of matter remained, allowing the stars, planets, and ultimately life as we know it to come about, and antimatter vanished. It took researchers at the European Organization for Nuclear Research, or CERN, decades to figure out how to create an antimatter version of the most basic atom, hydrogen, and trap it for long enough to perform tests. In a paper published online on Monday by the journal Nature, the team reported the first cautious result from an experiment with antihydrogen. But this has been met with contention from certain religious groups, including Christian Truther. In an article containing many scientific inaccuracies, well, I'd like to see exactly what scientific accuracies the Daily Mail has on here, because if you can look on the sidebar here, it's just a freaking, tabloid. That's right, because it's just porn on the right side there, Daily Mail, including Christian Truther. In an article containing many scientific inaccuracies, Christian truther claims CERN is creating hell on earth by performing these groundbreaking experiments. Antimatter is the opposite of matter. It isn't physical, it's spiritual, writes Emily. Antimatter can be described as the opposite of matter, but not in the sense that it is not physical. Oh. Normal atoms are made up of positively charged nuclei orbited by negatively charged electrons. However, their antimatter counterparts are the other way around. Emily then goes on to say CERN is building the kingdom of the Antichrist, hell on earth. She uses little in the way of scientific explanation to back up this claim. The very point behind science is to disprove faith. It's to disprove the Bible. That's the origin of it. It's a constant battle.
And the funny thing is about that is that he's right, that science, commissioned by the governments, mind you, have tried over and over again to disprove the Bible and to show that it's a fake. And every single time it has blown back in the faces of these scientists. For hundreds of years, they tried to say that the book of Daniel was inaccurate and written after the fact, that in no way, shape, or form could there have been an eyewitness in those times, and that the book of Daniel was fake. Because in that book, Daniel wrote that later on in his life, Babylon was ruled in duality with father and son. Nabonidus handed over Babylonia to his son Belshazzar, and Nabonidus basically retired to his summer palace, as it was called, in, I believe, Shushan. I'd have to read the book again. But he was like in semi-retirement. Theologians could not find any corroborative piece to the book of Daniel. Couldn't find anything to support the book of Daniel, so they said, you know what? It's full of crap. That's wrong. It's inaccurate. He wasn't there. The book is made up. Well, in the mid-20th century, as archaeologists were digging in Iraq, which is ancient Babylon, they came across cuneiforms, which are simply very large, round rocks that, as we write left to right on a square piece of paper, they wrote, I believe they did what the Jews did too, writing right to left, but they wrote in circular motion on these rocks. And they found a giant circular rock that stated, indeed, that at that time, the time when the Medes and the Persians conquered Babylon, circa 539 before the Common Era, Nabonidus and Belshazzar were in co-rulership. So, trying to disclaim the Bible backfired. And there's been time and time again where the Bible has been mocked. Scientists go out to prove that the Bible is full of stories, and yet it backfires. Same thing with the creation story. Oh, it's just a bunch of BS, just a bunch of BS. Meanwhile, science has proven the biblical order of creation, from a void to an earth, water, land, day and night, sea creatures, birds, land animals, then man. absolute, perfect order. And in no way, shape, or form could Moses and his predecessors have known that without receiving that information directly from the Creator himself. Impossible. So, science has actually proven the Bible to be historically, geographically, and archaeologically correct. Since those three things on the earthly level have been satisfied, there is no reason, there's no logical reason then that we shouldn't believe in the spiritual and the supernatural and the heavenly aspects of the Bible. If the other three have been proven, and they have, then denying the fourth aspect is just that. You've chosen to deny the truth. The clip continues.
Between science, theory, or biblical fact. See, the Bible is an account of historical events, things that have already happened and actually taken place. Science is theories, compiled on top of theories, pounded into our head to try and make us believe it. That's not a lie. It's not made up. That's not fake news. That's the truth. That's actually what it is. Oh, but we took our little machines and we calculated some numbers and here you go. So, teach this to the children. Teach it all to them. And don't ever teach the word or the gospel in schools anymore. Because that's what's going on right now. You know, here's a little bit of evidence.
What he says is true. And other clips that I have here will show the degradation of society. And this is why I have said, and I'll say it again today, because I know that there are some new listeners that haven't heard this before. And I'm reaching out to the young single people. I'm reaching out to the young single Christians in particular, because you are the foundation of the future. It's going to be you. I'm 52 years old. My children are grown. How they are is how they are. Okay? My procreation days are over. My child rearing days are over. But you young people that haven't started yet, you young Christians haven't started yet, you're the foundation to the future. And my advice to you is, number one, when you choose a spouse, choose one that lines up to your spiritual beliefs, your political beliefs, your philosophical beliefs, your child-rearing beliefs, all of it. Your morals, your ethics, all of it. You must come from a common bond. You have to. Because if you marry outside of that, and it's just, it's just the way it is. It's just nature. If you marry with conflicted ideologies, you will have conflict. And then you're going to pass that conflict onto your children, because you're going to want to raise them one way and your spouse is going to want to raise them another way. And then you're going to have this constant battle, this constant back and forth of how to raise your children and what to pass on to them as they enter teenage years and adulthood. You're always going to have the conflict. And a lot of people say money or lack thereof, is the number one reason for divorce. And that may be, but I have to believe then, if that's number one, I have to say that child rearing would be number two. If not the other way around. If not number one, it's number two. So, my advice is that you marry within your Christian congregation. Now, I'm not saying the church you go to. I'm saying you find someone that believes what you believe. That's your congregation, in my eyes. Your inner circle. It doesn't have to mean your church, because when Paul wrote that about who is to be in the congregation, remember, churches at that time were basically on the run, right? They faced Jewish persecution, Roman persecution, and the church was basically in people's homes that were brave enough to have church services in their homes. So their congregation wasn't just a place to go to. It was their inner circle of friends and family. Because your family at that time and your friends were believers. So that's what the congregation means, in my opinion. And then raise your children in the Christian fashion. And before you get married, sit down with your future spouse, read 1 Corinthians chapter 7, and pledge to live by it. And as a matter of fact, it really is my favorite letter or book, call it what you will, of the entire Bible. And I'll probably do a show on it or a big segment, because I don't know if I could do an hour on 1 Corinthians. We'll see. You can basically formulate your entire life from that letter alone, because Paul discusses all types of relationships. What love is, what the characteristics of love is, what discernment is, who to associate with, who not to associate with, how to approach your marriage. It's all in that one letter, all of it. So, that is my recommendation to you people. Sit down with your fiance, read 1 Corinthians chapter 7, especially, and swear to live by it. Because that way, things like Roe v. Wade may be on the books, and the government may be funding places like Planned Parenthood, but their doors will be severely lacking in attendance. Same thing with homosexuality and other perversions. And if you home study your children in the Bible, you can counteract the brainwashing and the manipulation taking place in our school systems, taking place even in our corrupt churches. And there's a clip that I'll be playing that's going to talk about that. This show's, it's already 40 minutes in. We're looking at an hour and a half show, at least. So, and that's okay. It makes up for yesterday. So let's continue with the clip.
To back up the claim. And this is an article by RT, not by us. 10 mind-blowing facts about the CERN Large Hadron Collider you need to know. CERN is the world's biggest machine, number 10. Number 9 has a massive gravitational pull. All of this is we could go into depth of, but there's one in particular that I want to go into. Number 8, CERN generates extreme temperatures, but Stephen Hawking is worried. Number 6, opening the door to other dimensions. 1 year after CERN's grand opening, Sergio, former director for research and scientific computing of the facility, grabbed headlines when he told a British tabloid the super collider could open other worldly doors to another dimension for any time, for a very tiny lapse of time, mere fractions of a second. However, that may be just enough to peer into this open door, either by getting something out of it or sending something into it. Now, what in the hell does that mean? Number 5, CERN's curious choice of geographic location. Now, on top of all the speculation as to what CERN scientists are really attempting to do with their Large Hadron Collider, many observers could not help but notice that the town in France where CERN is partially situated is called Saint-Genès-Pauli.
I just want to stop right there. What he said about the choice of geographic location. Right. First off, the country of France is up to its eyeballs in ancient, pre-Christian, death paganism symbols all over it. France, spiritually, is a very dark place. And it is no coincidence that much suffering is taking place in France today with the overrunning of it through the monotheistic religion of Satan known as Islam. There is no mistake, and there is no mistake that the French people had an opportunity to at least try to correct the ship with Marine Le Pen, but they voted for Macron anyway, who is a New World Order elitist puppet. He could be even worse than Merkel and Obama. Time will tell. I could be wrong on that, but time will tell. But it is no coincidence that the monotheistic religion of Satanism on this planet for 1400 years is flooding into France and causing much suffering. So when I learned that CERN was in France, I was not blown away. It makes absolutely perfect sense.
The name Pauli comes from the Latin Apollicum, and it is believed that in Roman times a temple existed in honor of Apollo. Somebody please explain to me who Apollo is. 'Cause I know, but I'm just saying, who is that? You see, it's not a coincidence anymore. There are so many different things that line up with Scripture that line up that this place is building or helped to building the kingdom of the Antichrist. It's kind of funny that it's just, of course, well, you know, just shut up and...
See, I can tell you who Apollo really is. Now, we've heard Greek mythology that he's like the god of fertility and spring. Really, like hedonism. Okay? You can really say that. This is coming from the book The New World Order, written by A. Ralph Epperson, written in the 80s. And I strongly suggest you get this book. You can get it on Amazon. If you have Prime, you'll get it within 48 hours. And, you know, I know a lot about this stuff, but this book blew me away. This book, The New World Order, by A. Ralph Epperson, absolutely blows the doors off of all of this Freemason, Illuminati, New World Order, devil-worshipping ideologies. It is absolutely amazing. I'm going to go to page 46. The star as a type of the myriad suns that light other countless systems of worlds is an emblem of that Masonic light in search of which every Mason travels. The correct knowledge of the deity and of his laws that control the universe. Now, this is coming from, actually, page 45, coming from a man named Mr. Mackey. His first name was in earlier pages, so I'm not going to get into that, but he's talking about who is the sun god. So, Closely allied with the symbol of the star is the symbol of the sun. Albert Pike, who has a statue of him in Washington, D.C., identified it with the worship of the past in this collection of quotes from his writings. The worship of the sun became the basis of all the religions of antiquity. That is correct. Pre-Christianity. The worship of the sun, right, we did that. Thousands of years ago, men worshipped the sun. Originally, they looked beyond the orb to the invisible God. They personified him as Brahma, Amon, Osiris, Bel, Adonis, Melkarth, Mithras, which Mithraism was the main pagan religion in the Roman Empire, which Christianity grew even through all the persecutions, was in direct conflict with the pagans, and Constantine saw that Rome was going to crumble from within in a religious civil war. And being the very intelligent man and the visionary Emperor Constantine was, he proclaimed, whether it's true or not, I don't know, that before this major battle, and again, the name of it escapes me, he proclaimed to his Roman army that in the clouds, in the sun, he saw a cross. Of course, the symbol of Jesus Christ's crucifixion. He had the cross put on all of the shields of his soldiers, and he gave victory to Jesus Christ. He then brokered a deal with the church, with the Bishop of Rome, also known as the Pope, and they made a compromise. They took parts of paganism, they took parts of the pure form of Christianity, and they infused it into a hybrid known as Roman Catholicism. And it was finally solidified. All of the tenets of Roman Catholicism were formed and approved at the Council of Nicaea, which I do get the dates wrong. It was either 313 Common Era or 332-ish, something in there. The Council of Nicaea solidified the Roman Catholic Church as we see it today. And we're going to get into the corruption of that church and the establishment church, which is the Church of Rome and its other many offshoots. And that'll be in the third clip. So, Apollo is actually another name for the sun god. And what does the sun give off? It bears light. Who is the light bearer? Lucifer, who then fell from grace, made man fall from grace. And names have symbolic meaning in the Bible. He became the rebel, the resistor, the father of the lie, Satan, the serpent. Continuing on with clip 1.
Sit down, Christians, because nobody wants to hear you. We've progressed past your time. That's why they're saying it's all past tense. No. That is incorrect. God is the same today, tomorrow, and yesterday. Now, let's go back.
Revelation calls him the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, who really has no end.
Back to this here. As above, so below has been misinterpreted by the mystics. Of course, we've already read this, but I'm reading it again. That put faith in it. They see themselves as God on earth and think that their actions are replicated by a God in heaven. We must remember who their God is to fully understand the statement. They follow the Antichrist by worshiping Satan or Lucifer. In a Christian context, below would be hell, The realm of the damned and earth would be the above. They are manifesting the bottomless pit on our planet, not replicating heaven. Get that through your head. It should be correctly stated, hell on earth.
Ladies and gentlemen, how can these latest statements made by this gentleman from Christian Truther, how can that be denied? Look outside your window. Is it any... Does this planet, worldwide, not just in America, worldwide, do you think that it resembles the heaven that has been described to us in many different forms? Or does it look like, something really hellish in the different ways it's been illustrated to us?
Matter discovery, proving supersymmetry can be understood using the same explanation. Antimatter would be a demonically charged particle retrieved from the pit, bringing with it chaos and destruction. CERN has coded it in such a way to make it sound positive, when in fact supersymmetry is inobtainable. Humans are not gods. Thus, we could never produce heaven on earth. CERN is...
Now, I want to stop right there for a second, because in many, many Masonic symbolism, you see the numbers 322 inside a triangle. That stands for Genesis chapter 3, verse 22. And it's back to the Garden of Eden scene. Excuse me. Adam and Eve, and that could stand for, humankind, right? Discovered good and evil. Put another way, they decided through, again, satanic manipulation. So let me reword that. Lucifer, who was jealous of man because God loved him so, came to earth, and through his manipulation, through his bad intent, showed humankind that they didn't need God, that they could think for themselves and become their own God. Like, why be subservient to your Creator, who you felt and you knew had good intentions for you, but this entity comes along and says, God is shorting you. He's keeping you from your full potential. He's keeping you in servitude. I can show you the way, excuse me, that you can develop your own wisdom, that you can make decisions best for you, and you don't need God's help. And you can actually, think and do for yourselves. So, in the allegory of the fruit, which was that knowledge of good and evil, that discernment, that wisdom outside of God's word, that's what that fruit was. Well, mankind got their eyes opened. And they didn't like that picture. They saw themselves naked and were ashamed. to me, what that means is they, they realized they were greatly flawed, and that they actually did need God's guidance, and were ashamed when God showed up in their presence directly, calling for them, and they were embarrassed because they realized they were fooled. And then this other tree, the tree of life, and there's not much written about that, but verse 322 says, "And the Lord God said, the man now has become like one of us, knowing good and evil." In other words, man can now decide what's best for him without God's guidance. He must now not be allowed to reach out his hand and take from the tree of life and eat and live forever. Now, as you know, as we know, God knows everything. What is this tree of life? Is it a real tree? Is it something that man could develop? Gee, I don't know. Maybe X amount of thousands of years later, and through technology could perhaps download his consciousness into some supercomputer perhaps, and actually have his earthly consciousness live forever and dictate for all times the course of human events, and leave Jehovah and Jesus Christ out of the equation through the future ascendant's lack of knowledge of him, by wiping out Christianity and by wiping out the history books and writing history of their own version. Is that possible? Is it possible to harness some sort of energy that a select group will live forever? I think that's something to think about. See, the goal of these elites is to become just like one of us. And God is talking to his heavenly court, as I explained in Job. He's talking about becoming an eternal entity. Not transforming through God's grace into an eternal entity. Either going to heaven, becoming a spiritual guide for humans, whatever. It's becoming an eternal consciousness created not by God or allowed by God, but created by man himself. That technology is now being created, if it's not here already, and certainly organizations like CERN and DARPA, they're working on that kind of stuff. And IBM and Google, they're all part of it. They're all part of it. So, that is why you see 322 in many, many of Masonic symbolism. So let's move on with the clip.
Building the kingdom of the Antichrist, hell on earth. I hope that makes sense to a lot of people, because a lot of Satan's biggest lie is that humans can be godlike, or humans can be God. Put it that way. one of Satan's biggest lies. I want to put it that way. I don't want to say definitively that's the biggest lie, but that's one of the biggest. Let's put it that way. Now let's go back here. She uses little in the way of scientific explanation to back up this claim. Instead, she relies on a bizarre theory comparing antimatter to hell and matter to heaven. No, to a demonically charged particle, not to hell itself. Antimatter would be a demonically charged particle retrieved from the pit, bringing it with it chaos and destruction, she says. It appears the same author has a track record of writing scaremongering articles regarding the research facility. Scaremongering articles. Really? Because I'm pretty sure that there are physicists who are concerned, who have actually sued the facility. So it is very reasonable to be concerned about CERN. It's not scaremongering when you're trying to expose someone. I don't get fear off of this article. I don't know how you get fear off of this. The only reason you get...
Well, I don't get fear from it exactly, but certainly I believe I would be afraid if the day would ever come that the globalists would come into my face and let's say, I'm just using this as an illustration, put a gun to my face and say, you either renounce Christ or I'm going to pull the trigger, or I'm going to put you on a cross and make you suffer. Now, I'm not saying that will happen, certainly not in my lifetime. But I would be afraid in that instance of evil confrontation. But I would not be afraid of me losing my soul to some sort of eternal damnation. And I'm not shaking under my bed that these world events are taking place. I would have an initial shock, flight, or fight reaction, and my personality is I fight. You could ask my wife. I fight. But a long-term fear or dread? No, I agree with this man. I don't have that. Even with what I know, what I see taking place, no, I'm not in fear. I'm not in fear of an eternal dread. I would be afraid of, like, if people talking about civil war, and if I'm hearing gunfire, and if I'm seeing people killed, yeah, sure, you're in that fight or flight mentality. But no, I don't feel dread at all either.
Fear if you're not exactly right with God. The scientific explanation for antimatter does not involve a pit of hell. Instead, oh, here we go. Let's let science talk. Let's let science have its day. In the recent study, the researchers found when it is simulated with a laser, antihydrogen appears to produce light on the same ultraviolet frequency as its nemesis in the world of matter. Hydrogen as its nemesis. Oh, okay. All right. Adding energy. In this case with a laser. And see, I'm getting too frustrated. You think? Continuing on. Since antimatter is spiritual, it would be difficult to trap and study. But now that they have found it on the light spectrum, they can more quickly determine its composition. The hidden spiritual side is becoming visible, revealing the demonic realm on Earth more than ever before. CERN is shut down for its annual winter break, but just because the machine is shut down doesn't mean they aren't working. Scientists are analyzing the tons of data they collected this year and upgrading their machines for a bigger 2017 startup. The measurement of antimatter on the optical spectrum was one of CERN's most significant findings in 2016. Get ready for a chaotic 2017 as they use what they found to manipulate our world. Now, let me just say something really quickly here, because this is pretty interesting. Not too long ago, we reported on this. I made this article quite a while ago. Brain zapping. Willful participants subject themselves to mind control. Brain stimulants cause removal of faith. And do you know what they're using? In this article here, they're using magnets pumped into the brain to literally alter the belief system of people. Now, this gigantic magnet, the world's largest machine, where did I get that? Number 10. Ah, there it is. World's biggest machine is basically like a 27-kilometer magnet. and it's spinning and pumping all day long. What kind of effect do you think that has on people? Oh, there's none. You're just a crazy conspiracy theorist. Yeah, right. Because this little tiny magnet strapped to the brain, as you can see here, this person in the background here, that can alter his belief in not only immigration, but God. Now, of course, to the real Christians, to the real brethren, that's not going to happen. But you get my point. There's something going on with this. Now, as to Daily Mail's attack on us, it's kind of interesting because most of the time, Daily Mail doesn't use personal names. They use the name of the website. But in this particular one, they're attacking Emily directly without actually giving a person to respond to or even being asked for comment. That's kind of funny. So they're just going to take their own bias and opinion and put it against ours. Well, I got one thing to say to the Daily Mail directly. When you get done chasing the demon of Kim Kardashian around, we'll still be here for question or comment and covering the things that actually matter. You want to find more information? Go to ChristianTruther.com. God bless and carry on.
And so he concludes with, these magnetic things, manipulating our thoughts and whatnot, won't affect true Christians and those that truly believe. Again, he's absolutely correct, because I use myself as an example. As my faith becomes stronger, and it is, and this past year, I feel that I am closer to Jehovah and Jesus Christ than I've ever been. Matter of fact, I announced yesterday that on July 9th, I'm getting baptized. I'm ready. And actually, as my faith grows stronger, I am more repulsed against the world. As it states in the Bible, you got two choices. Become part of the world or be with God. That's it. You can't dance in between. And what I mean by that is, you can't say, I'm a Christian, but I'm pro-choice. Can't. I'm Christian, but I support same-sex marriage. You can't. Can't do it. Just like you can't say, well, I'm pro-Constitution, I love America, but I'm for illegal immigration and giving amnesty. You can't. And apologies for the dogs barking. So I'm going to end the show today because this is way too long. I'm going to go into part 2 of this show tomorrow. And so I'm protected. I know that I'm in line with the cross. And I know that spiritually, I am going farther and farther away from the world. I am removing myself from the world spiritually. And quite frankly, my wife is into metaphysics and stuff. She's been saying it to me, that could possibly manifest into a terminal disease where I leave all the way. Well, time will tell. But certainly, spiritually, I am moving farther and farther away from the material, physical earth, which is in the hands of the wicked one, 1 John 5:19, Satan the devil. This is Michael B. This is the Truth Zone. See you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Texas time.